On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping.
The referee's decision to red card. I didn't know what the hell a red card was. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding. This guy just hands up, okay, your best player is not going to play next week or in the next game. I said, wow, that's a lot of power. That's terrible.
Has the Strait of Hormuz been issued a red card? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Is he talking about FIFA or Iran? I'm confused. I'm confused in this press conference that the President of the United States just had, because he seems to be mixing some issues together. Yes, he is probably there talking about that most evil organization, that organization that has dictatorial control over a key facet of the world. What? Yeah, I'm talking about FIFA at this moment. Talking about the red card issued to the United States for the upcoming game against Belgium. However, in that same press conference, I think he was talking about the Strait of Hormuz.
Famous Strait of Hormuz, nobody ever heard of, but that is some big money machine, I'll tell you what. When you look at the numbers, Michael, that makes everything look small.
Nobody's ever heard of the Strait of Hormuz? This is a strange world we're living in here today. There are more Europeans running around the United States right now than when Columbus landed here and the conquistadors followed them than ever before. Football, soccer has taken over the United States. The President of the United States, in the same press conference, is talking about a red card in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, you can't write this material for what it is. And we're going to talk about it. It is week 18 of the Strait of Hormuz. That's right, week 18. We're talking about the week from June 28th to July 5th. And, last week, I'll admit, I was a little depressed. I was a little depressed, and it showed at the beginning of that episode.
Hi.
Yeah, not my best moment right there. I'll admit that. So this week we're gonna be strong, Sal. We're gonna be strong. I locked up the booze, and we're gonna talk about week 18 and what is happening. Because again, holy crap, what another week of events that transpired in the Strait. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell as we lock ourselves in for this week recap. So this replay by Kepler, and I strung together 3 of their videos together. They do these recaps, post them over on X, and Kepler is the one that runs marine traffic, gives you the graphical display here of the Strait of Hormuz from 29 June up until July 5th. And one of the things you'll notice here is a couple of features. Number one, that northern channel here being operated by the Iranians is in force. We can see ships using that channel, but you will see these clumps of vessels coming through that southern channel. This is the United States using that southern Omani channel. So you'll see clumps of vessels come through here, and you'll get a visualization. And what we're definitely seeing up until about the middle of last week was an equal use of those channels. But right around the 4th of July, things changed substantially. So here you see 3 July, a batch of convoys going through. But on the 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States, what we saw was an aborted attempt to run. These ships right here will all of a sudden turn around, and some of them route northward and head on the very southern end of the Iranian channel on the way out. We don't know what precipitated that disruption. We just know that it did take place. Now, we saw the resumption of convoy traffic shortly thereafter going through the strait. And so we can assume that basically the United States or Iran had some sort of issue there. The Iranians, we believe, issued some warnings to ships. That's what precipitated the turnaround. But now traffic is going back through. Now, we do have some further announcements from the United States. This is out from the Joint Maritime Information Center on July 6th. This is from the Navy Coordination and Assistance Group, NCAGS. The maritime security threat level in the Strait of Hormuz remains substantial, and the big issue here in red, mariners are reminded that the southern route of the Strait of Hormuz has been expanded and remains available for all traffic. Mariners should expect VHF very high frequency, this is the channel 16, hailing from naval forces, and be cognizant of the mine danger area in the traditional traffic separation scheme published in JMIC Advisory 011-26. Mariners are advised that they may transit the southern route day or night with their AIS on, radars radiating, running lights on, and normal use of VHF in accordance with best management practices For maritime security, mariners are strongly encouraged to maintain engagement with NCAGs and utilize established reporting and coordination procedures. Coordination with NCAGs is not mandatory. Ships may transit the southern route without coordination. In other words, ships, if they want to, can head via that route. This is the JMIC advisory as of 5 July. The regional threat level remains substantial. You'll see a confirmed attack, but that was down off the coast of Yemen. We're going to come back to that and discuss it. The operational summary for the Strait of Hormuz: commercial traffic through the strait remains steady, with vessels continuing to transit via both the southern Omani corridor and the northern Iranian controlled route. Reporting does not indicate a sustained increase in movements along the southern corridor. Instead, traffic patterns appear stable following the widening of the southern route. There's literally no mention of the disruption that we saw on 4 July. IRGC hailing, that's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. UAS, which is unmanned aircraft systems activity and targeted surveillance, continued throughout the period, indicating sustained monitoring of commercial shipping and a continued intent to assert presence across key transit lanes. And it goes back to Nav Area 9 180-26, which talks about the identification of mines in the area. If you go over to the Gulf of Aden, with threats associated with historical skiff activity and pirate-related approaches remain, one event was reported in this period, and that's UK MTO 79-26. If we look at the regional threat levels, Strait of Hormuz, Gulf of Aden are at substantial, with the Eastern Mediterranean at low. The Strait of Hormuz, which was averaging 138 vessels a day prior to the conflict, on 4 July had 18 transits, on 3 July 29, on 2 July 33. The U.S.-assisted Strait of Hormuz transits over the past 72 hours was 70. So that report by JMIC, the Joint Maritime Information Center, is giving the indication that, listen, the southern route and the northern route is open. But as you'll see over the past week, there has been disruptions to those two routes, as we saw in the replay. If we look at the data, this is coming from Rory Johnson over on Twitter. He's tracking Middle East Gulf loading. So this is the loading of oil on ships in the Middle East. You'll see here in dark, going back to early March, this is very much the end. Now, this is loadings. This is not transits through the Strait of Hormuz. This is just loading, but you'll see loadings here in the Saudi Arabian Gulf, in the UAE Gulf, in Iraq, in Kuwait, in Iran, and in other states. So this is that 20 million barrels per day that was being loaded. You see the slowdown here in loading because, again, you're not loading ships because you can't get them out. Where you're seeing loading being done here in red is Iran, all the way up and through May. And then in May, we start seeing loadings being done. The UAE, in conjunction with the United States and that effort to use that southern Omani channel, begins to run ships out. There's a decline here in about mid-May. This is when the U.S. officially said they were stopping that route, but then behind the scenes they didn't. They kept it going. And what we see here is an increase. Notice how Iran's loading of oil decreases here. This is in conjunction with the blockade. And so you can see how Iran is slowing up. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You'll see here the UAE really increasing. We see the restart of oil being loaded by Saudi Arabia here. And so what you're seeing coming out of the Persian Gulf in terms of loading is somewhere around 6 million barrels. Now, the U.S., now part of that is Iran. You can take about 1 million off there, get you back down to about 5 million. There is a report by the U.S. about 10 million barrels a day coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, but that is in conjunction with the overland pipelines down in Yanbu going to the Red Sea and across the UAE going to Fujairah in the Gulf of Oman. The line that's interesting here that includes is ballasted or empty tankers coming into the Gulf. Notice the capacity here is to load a lot more tankers. This means we're seeing empty tankers coming back into the Gulf. And I think that's a major indication that things are starting to improve. They're nowhere near where they were. Let's be clear about that. We're not at pre-war levels by any means. Even though you'll hear things like, listen, Gulf, the price of oil is down. It's at pre-war levels for the price of oil. When you look at global stores around the world, both afloat and ashore, they're at record lows. And this is a problem because all you need is one, wrench in the works here, and it's going to throw this system off. And you can see a much larger spike in oil if that occurs. That's the danger right now. We're really close to the precipice here of an emergent problem, because if all of a sudden global disruptions of oil are again take place, then we're going to see a much harsher reaction than we saw back in March. Now, as we do every week, we're going to go ahead over to gCaptain, and I pulled the stories off for the past week from June 28th up until July 5th. So, first story, Pakistan urgently seeks liquefied natural gas as Hormuz flare-up chokes supply. So, one of the issues I keep saying is in the United States, in the European Union, in the more developed nations, the nations with the highest GDPs out there, you're not going to be seeing disruptions like you're seeing right now in those underdeveloped nations. And this is key. Nations that are not at the top level, they're the ones suffering the disruptions. In the developed nations, you're going to pay more at the pump, without a doubt. And those nations that don't have the deep pockets to pull money out, they're going to suffer. And Pakistan is one of them. Pakistan and India derive a lot of their energy from that Persian Gulf because of the locality. It's close by. It's easy for them to do it. And this disruption is having big problems. Middle East producers push on with oil and LNG loadings despite ship attacks. That coordinates with what we saw with Rory Johnson's chart there. We're seeing more and more loadings take place. Very optimistic. However, we've got to get the ships out. And one of the problems that we're seeing right now is while we're seeing an uptick in the number of ships coming out of the Persian Gulf, the problem is it's coming as a pulse. It's not a steady flow. And pulses are always a big problem because they create disruptions and they can be very much hindered. Chinese asphalt tanker makes second U.S. coastwise voyage under Jones Act waiver. So within the United States, things are heating up regarding the Jones Act waiver, which is supposed to go through August. A lot of pushback by U.S. shipping firms and U.S. companies about this. We're seeing groups actually structure and organize a campaign against this waiver to counter those who are in favor of the waiver. And as usual, what we're seeing is a big fight. One of the interesting side effects here was a early on position that this was going to lead to Chinese companies getting involved in the inland coastal waters. We did not see Chinese ships initially, but we're seeing them now. In this case, a Chinese asphalt tanker, which is making a second voyage. UN warns Hormuz crisis will leave lasting economic scars despite shipping recovery. This is true. We have damaged the global economy. As I've said repeatedly, time and time again, look at the world shipping, map. That is the circulatory system of global trade. When you clamp off a major artery for a long period of time, you start killing tissue. And that's what we're doing here in regards to economics. Even if everything opens back up, it's going to take a long time to get back to any sort of pre-war levels. Iran ratchets up talk of controlling Hormuz before new talks. Again, I think this is Iran's strategy. They want more control over the Strait of Hormuz. They realize they have a mechanism they can use. I really fault the U.S. here for a couple of things, not the least of which is we saw this happening in the Red Sea with the Houthi. We knew this was a play that could be done, and we didn't do a lot to mitigate it. Yes, we executed military strikes along with Israel against Iran, but they thought they were going to be short-term strikes. Now Iran has a lever, and what Iran is using this lever for is to achieve their political goals. I get dinged all the time because I fail to mention this, so I'm going to talk about it right now. Lebanon. The Iranians don't want the Israelis in Lebanon. They don't want Israel expanding beyond their border. And so that is a major issue in these talks. I talk about global shipping. And so I don't talk always about Lebanon because it's really outside the purview, and I'm not an expert in Mideast politics and in that area at all. However, what I will say this is Iran knows that they can push this lever of Hormuz. And what they're trying to do is, while they can't impact Israel directly, what they're trying to do is impact the world and the U.S. to force pressure on Israel to back off. And that's the mechanism they're using here. Report challenges the national security case for extended Jones Act waiver. Again, lots of issues here regarding the Jones Act. So a new analysis from a consulting group argues that the Trump administration's emergency Jones Act waiver has failed to deliver. So one of the things that they said about the Jones Act waiver was it was going to help lower gasoline prices. It didn't. It didn't help it at all. Matter of fact, gasoline prices are higher than before. And one of the things that it can't measure, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, is you can't measure what the price of gasoline would have been without the waiver. What this tells me, and I think that what's being missed between the friggin' fight between both sides here, is that the U.S. needs more tankers. That's the issue I come away with. We need more tankers to support the U.S. fleet out in the Indian Ocean, which we were using commercial tankers to do. And what this is showing in the United States is we could use more commercial tankers in the U.S. trade. So what I don't see and what I would want to see is a bill to start building more U.S. tankers in the United States. We're talking about shipbuilding in the United States, build more tankers. And if you look at the global market, that's what's happening right now. Tankers are being placed on the order book. The problem on the global order book is this. It's full. I mean, you're going to be 3 years out before you see a new ship. We're talking about 2029 before you get your new ship. Even a tanker, which is a fairly straightforward ship to build, it's going to take you a while. And China's sitting there right now with over 70% of the global order book. Iran says ship ran aground in authorized Hormuz transit. All right, I want to talk about this story for a second because, can I be clear, Iran? Why lie? I mean, just why lie? I mean, governments don't always tell the truth. And listen, I'm an American. I'm going to tell you right now, the U.S. government has not always told the truth all the time. Got you on that. I understand that. I'm a historian. I talk about this all the time. And governments at time are going to give you kind of a best spin on events. Some will call it propaganda. Some will call it disinformation. There's a whole batch of things for it. But Iran wove a tale this week that was so easy to unravel that it amazes me that they even tried to do this. So this is the story that came out. Foreign offending ship stranded in the Strait of Hormuz. According to a report based in the Strait of Hormuz, the foreign container ship was unable to continue sailing due to the shallow sea on its chosen route. According to the IRGC's Navy's warning to captains, owners, and officials of shipping companies around the world, any entry and exit other than the path of authority in the Persian Gulf will cause irreparable accidents. The Islamic Republic of Iran has introduced the entry and exit route of all vessels in the Strait of Hormuz only from the south of Larak Island, and if the vessels coordinate to pass through the route of authority and receive the IRGC will take over the security from the moment of entry to the exit of the Persian Gulf. All right, there's a video showing this vessel in particular, and the commentary out from the Iranian military is this vessel used the southern channel to go into the Strait of Hormuz, deviated from the approved Iranian channel, ran aground, and that's the story. All right. Complete BS. I mean, just bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm calling bullshit on this one full. It took me all of not even 5 minutes to figure this out. This ship right here, first of all, very aground. Congratulations. That's about as aground as you're going to get here. You can't get more, very difficult to get more aground than this ship right here. This ship is in shallow water. I mean, we're talking about maybe a couple of meters deep. If you look at the containers on the vessel, it takes you no time at all to start counting here and figure out you've got about 50 containers in each of these cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 2 more after here. So probably about 8 of them, probably about 400 containers on top, 400 containers in the hull. Those are 40-foot equivalent units. Those are the 40-foot boxes. You double them for TEUs. Rough estimate is this is a 1,500 to 2,000 TEU ship. So very quickly, you can do a search, and that's exactly what I did. So this is Marine Traffic. Marine Traffic is nice enough to give me access to their site, and so I can use a batch of the features on there. And what I did is I cleaned off the map, and I looked at container ships under 2,000 TEU, and I had a handful of them in and around, and just clicking on them, I find this ship right here, the Arista. The Arista is a container ship just under 2,000 TEU, and notice it says aground. The problem with this here is it's not in the southern Omani channel over here. It is up here between Hormuz Island and Iran. It is about a mile off the coast of Iran. And not only that, it has been aground since mid-March. So the fact that Iran put out this story here and sat there and said, Iran says ship ran aground in unauthorized Hormuz transit, again, is complete bull. It just is. And it took me 5 minutes to figure it out. Tanker Trackers had it done faster than I did. It didn't take long to figure this out. I just don't understand why governments think they can get away with this. This sounds great for homegrown propaganda where you don't have access to it, but it's terrible for international propaganda because, again, it takes 2 seconds to figure this stuff out. Russia buys gasoline from India to tackle shortages, sources says. So, in one of the weirdest movements of trade around the planet, one of the things we've been seeing is Russia's been exporting massive amounts of oil because of the sanctions levied against it during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, still ongoing since February of 2022. And one of the things it's been doing is selling oil to countries, and those countries refine it, turn it into diesel fuel, and not only do they refine it, but they launder it because now it's not Russian oil anymore and it can be sold on the open market. Well, now Russia, which has been selling a lot of oil to India, is buying back refined product from India. They're buying diesel back and shipping it back into Russia. Why are they doing that? Because the Ukrainians are targeting Russian refineries and storage facilities, and there's a shortage of diesel in Russia. Matter of fact, Russia is getting ready to probably stop the export of all diesel out of the country because of shortages. And this just adds to the global disruption we're seeing in trade. U.S. and Iran enter technical talks to secure peace deal shipping restart. So remember, the MOU gives you a 30, 60-day window there for certain aspects. And again, that MOU, this is the thing that's driving everything, the 14 points here, but particularly sections 4 and 5 of the MOU that are dealing with the Strait of Hormuz. There's got to be a resolution at the end of the 60-day window, and in particularly issues like fees and who has ultimate control over the Strait of Hormuz, because everyone is arguing that Iran cannot be allowed to have control over it. I'm going to say everyone, the International Maritime Organization, most nations around the world, most shipping companies around the world, and there's a precedent for that because Iran doesn't control the Strait of Hormuz. They have at most half the territorial waters reaching out into the Strait of Hormuz. Oman has the other half, but through the right of transit passage, Iran cannot prevent flow of ships in and out of the Strait of Hormuz for those nations inside the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. House Republican leaders urged Trump to let Jones Act waivers expire as scheduled in August. So had a huge letter written by about 50 members of Congress, largely in the House of Representatives, pushing President Trump to end the waiver. And again, this is an issue that's getting a lot of attention now in the United States regarding the issue if we've got oil flowing out of the Persian Gulf, if we're seeing a restoration, if oil is at the lowest level, back to pre-war levels in terms of cost, should the waiver still continue? Armed boarders damage merchant ship off Yemen as second vessel reports suspicious approach. So we're seeing a resurgence of piracy. The European Union operation of Speeds, which operates down in down in the area off the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Bab el Mandeb. Cheers. Tradition here at the What's Going On with Shipping when we mentioned the BAM. We're seeing Operation Speeds and Operation Atlanta, which is their anti-piracy operation, going into fuller force there because we're seeing small attacks against vessels in the area. We don't think these are Houthi. We think these are piracy attacks. And there's a lot of politics going on in this region right now. There's shortages ashore. There's issues in Somalia with Somalia and Somaliland. There's issues in Yemen. So we don't know the geopolitical issue, but what we are seeing is a resurgence in pirate attacks, small vessel attacks against larger vessels transiting the area. Saudi Arabia ramps up exports from Ras Tananora, switches to spot sales. So that chart from Rory Johnson showed you Saudi Arabia increasing offloads just restarting offloads in the Persian Gulf. What's interesting is the spot sales. That's interesting. That means they're selling it, load by load. There's not long-term contracts here, which means that this could be pricey because spot pricing is always more expensive than long-term pricing. U.S. sees 10 million barrels via Hormuz, sapping Iran oil leverage. Again, the numbers aren't showing 10 million. I'm sorry. We talk about propaganda and issues. Show me those numbers, United States. You got to show me those numbers because the numbers I'm seeing right now, you're getting 10 million barrels out, but that's using the pipelines too. You're seeing about 5 million come out on tankers, and it's not a smooth flow. Some of those tankers that are coming out through the Strait of Hormuz are stopping and transferring their load, doing ship-to-ship transfers and coming back in. That slows up the process. So again, we got to be showing your math here. Sorry, folks. China urges unimpeded passage of Hormuz as fee chatter mounts. So here's China kind of jumping in here, saying that, listen, we don't want fees in a strait. Now, for China, this is really important because China is constrained by a lot of maritime passages. So this is a density map showing you the coast of China. So coast of China right along here, all the way from Vietnam up to North Korea. But for China to get access to the sea, it runs through choke points between China and Japan, between the Japanese home islands, by Taiwan, Philippines, and as you come down here through the South China Sea, through Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. I mean, China is just constrained. If you look at China, their entire coastline has a barrier across it. Nations like the United States don't have that. There's no impediment to leaving a U.S. port and heading out. The only place that even comes close is Seattle, where you have Canada to the north. Every other U.S. port basically dumps out into the middle of the ocean, which is great. China doesn't. And so China doesn't want to see unimpeded passages because of fear that that could be leveled against them by Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, you name it. Nobody wants to see that. U.S. oil companies see big profit jump, gird for clash over pump prices with Trump. All right, so President Trump has been on a rampage against oil companies here to lower their cost of gasoline and diesel. The problem is there's a lag. There's a natural lag. You're buying your oil for future, and you're not buying oil for the present. And this is the big issue. You're always ahead here. And so oil and gas prices have not come down in the U.S., at least not to the level that the president is comfortable with. And he is claiming price gouging and issues like that. I just don't think they're quite understanding how the oil market works and how commodities work on the world stage. Plus, there's still a lot of risk out there in the oil trade because, again, we're at record low capacities or storage capacity, both afloat and ashore. Until those levels come up, there's not a lot of cushion in the system. Japan weighs return to Iranian oil as shipping risk cloud sanctions waiver. So this is a really interesting story. Japan is looking at buying Iranian oil. Now, Iranian oil is out on the world market. It can be bought. Now, typically Iranian oil is bought by China. However, China's not buying a lot of Iranian oil. So this is the latest blog by the United Against Nuclear Iran, and they've been tracking basically, what's been going on with Iranian shipping here. I want to read from the section here on Iranian flag tankers globally. On July 2nd, Amber, Darina, Snow, and Starla transited the Singapore Strait eastbound toward the EOPL, which is the Eastern Outer Port Limits. This is a box off the eastern coast of Malaysia. You can see it here in red. That's the box they're talking about, where they do ship-to-ship transfers. Diona, Hero 2, Sanya 1 have all previously passed the Singapore Strait have since stopped broadcasting their location on AIS. They will most likely conduct a ship-to-ship transfer in the EOPL. Some may have proceeded to an anchorage area south of Hong Kong. It is unlikely they will proceed directly to China ports, but that would mark a significant change in operational procedure. It remains to see how the evolving pattern of Iran's oil trade and dark fleet operations will change following the signing of the MOU. And then at the bottom here, on July 2nd, 50 tankers listed on UANI's Ghost Armada were anchored or loitering near the EOP area with their AIS signals active, demonstrating that the Ghost Fleet tankers continue to operate with impunity across Southeast Asia's sea lane. So understand, Iranian tankers tend not to go into other ports other than Iran for a couple of reasons, not the least of which they would probably be sanctioned or targeted because of they're not meeting the standards set by the International Maritime Organization. They're crappy ships. I don't know how to say it more than that. They have a lot of deficiencies. And when you go into any nation's ports, that nation is supposed to conduct what's called a port state control inspection, where you inspect the vessel and make sure it meets the standards of marine pollution, of safety of life at sea, that the crew's treated nicely and getting paid, all those kind of things. And Iran doesn't do that. They don't bring their ships in. Instead, they go to this anchorage off the east coast of Malaysia and do ship-to-ship transfers. The problem is that oil doesn't seem to be moving. Normally it'd be moving to China, but it's not. And that's because China has decreased its import levels. We think because they're draining from their strategic petroleum reserve, which is massive, 1.4 billion barrels, or they're getting oil from different sources. But what we've seen is it doesn't look like that either. They have just seemed to have curtailed their oil usage. Now, maybe they're pulling from reserves we don't know about. I don't know. But now this oil sitting there is going to be probably discounted by the Iranians because they want to sell it. And now Japan is looking at buying it because the U.S. has desanctioned it. So if you're Japan, you can buy Iranian oil. However, Japan's probably not going to bring Iranian tankers into their ports because they would ding them on these port state controls. So what you'll see is more ship-to-ship transfers out in that anchorage. CMA CGM ship hit by missile in Hormuz Strait may go for scrapping. So this is the CMA CGM San Antonio. This vessel was the subject of our Week 10 recap, where we showed you images and videos from the ship of the damage caused by the missile. Obviously, the ship was damaged enough that now it looks like it's not economical to repair it. Ironically, on July 2nd, CMA CGM just welcomed its largest ship, the CMA CGM Notre Dame. I'm actually going to be doing a video on that vessel specifically. And so CMA CGM just decides we're not going to even fix this vessel. But again, this is part of that cost of doing business in the Strait of Hormuz. This is when we thought the strait was opening back up, and here this ship was struck by an Iranian cruise missile. Iran and Qatar resume maritime trade. Now, this isn't just moving goods. This is actually a movement of commercial goods between those two countries. This ends a 5-month suspension between these two nations. And again, Qatar is really desperate to get the flow of liquefied natural gas moving, and it needs the strait open. So it's trying to improve relations with Iran. The race to rescue 8,000 sailors still stranded behind Hormuz. You may remember that the IMO, back on Day of the Seafarer, June 25th, had started a process to get ships out. And what we saw was several hundred vessels come out, about 2,500 mariners, 3,500 mariners came out on those vessels, but then we had attacks from the Iranians, and that curtailed everything, and it stopped. So we're still looking at about 8,000 mariners stranded inside the Strait of Hormuz. Again, some of those crews have swapped out. There are new mariners out there, but what we're seeing is the ships are trapped, and more importantly, the mariners are living under the threat, which is a major issue. Cargo ship reports attack off Yemen, adding to Red Sea risk. So again, we're seeing that uptick off the coast of the Red Sea. These attacks, small vessel attacks, this could hamper the return of shipping to the Red Sea. We kept waiting to see shipping return to the Red Sea, started to see it in September of 2025, but then with the start of the conflict with Iran, that was all curtailed. Indonesia, Singapore reaffirm free passage in the Strait of Malacca. So talked about China before. This is what everybody wants to see. We don't want to see the straits of the world become tolls and, under the operational control of nations. You don't want Gibraltar. You don't want Strait of Malacca. You don't want the Taiwan Straits. You don't want the Strait of Tsushima. You don't want to see this happen. Now, some straits are different because of their geography. Turkish straits within Turkish waters, Danish straits within Danish waters. There's also issues with pilotage and tugs and vessel traffic schemes and systems in place. Again, there are issues at play here that make each strait different. However, the issue of free passage is a bedrock concern that was started after World War II. Maersk and Hapag expand Suez Canal return with AE-15 service. So Maersk and Hapag had just resumed this service prior to February 28th, and now they're starting it back up again. CMA CGM runs every now and then a large vessel through, but they have the protection of the Marine Nationale, the French Navy, provide a kind of a faster service through the Strait of, through the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, cheers, and the Gulf of Aden. IMO chief urges immediate release of 44 seafarers held by Somali pirates. So again, IMO coming out here talking about this. The IMO is at issue with the 8,000 mariners trapped in the Strait of Hormuz, but they're also making this issue about the seafarers held by Somalis. I will say this, the Somali pirates back in the 2010s, this is the period when you had Somali piracy in its highest form. It was grabbing ships, and literally the only nations that were reacting is when it dealt with their own ships. The reason the U.S. go after Maersk, Alabama is because they've captured Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks is a national treasure, and you can't let him be held by the Somalis. No, Maersk, Alabama was a U.S. ship, and so the U.S. Navy responded to an attack on a U.S. ship, and they got Captain Phillips back. Unfortunately, many ships, Malaysian crews, Filipino crews, Indonesian crews, they kind of just sat under Somali custody because, again, nobody cared because they were flying open registries and flags of conveniences. Finally, IMO Council opens with maritime security, Hormuz, and piracy high on the agenda. So the 137th Council opened up in London on Monday. The IMO is meeting to discuss many issues, and this will be one that's on the forefront. So week 18 of the Strait of Hormuz, what has changed? Well, again, we thought we were open, then all of a sudden this red card came up. And we saw a disruption, but trade's going again. And I guess, Iran and FIFA are one and the same. What's that? I'm going to get in trouble? To tell you the truth, I'm a little more worried about FIFA than I am with Iran on that. So a little bit worried about FIFA. What we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz is no clear resolution yet. Yes, we're seeing an uptick. Yes, we're seeing more traffic go through. Yes. Everything's looking positive. However, it's only going to take one thing to derail this issue, because the underlying issue here is that if you spook commercial shipping, they will freeze in place. They're like those goats that run around and all of a sudden they lock in place. That's global shipping. It's like a goat. It's like a fainting goat. They're going to sit there, lock up, and then fall over. That's what they have. Not because they're scared, because that is their tactic for dealing with a predator. Unfortunately, what we haven't seen, and again, not a lot of discussion about this, is what the United States and other nations are doing to counter the Iranian threat in the Strait of Hormuz. We're getting that there's minesweeping going on. We're getting that there is these convoys coming out that we're seeing on that map by Kepler. What we're not hearing is what the U.S. is doing directly to push through the Strait of Hormuz and open it back up. We have not heard about U.S. destroyers making a presence felt in the Strait of Hormuz or in the Persian Gulf. There seems to be an effort to kind of lock up Iranian oil and not allow it to go out. Obviously, if Japan is looking at getting Iranian oil, that's a big thing. One of the last convoys that just went out today out of the Strait of Hormuz was Japanese oil. Several tankers that had Japanese oil or oil earmarked for Japan came out. So Japan is playing a big role here behind the scenes. Instead of buying Iranian oil, maybe they're working behind the scenes to get a Japanese oil flowing to them. They're desperate. They have sapped down their strategic petroleum reserve. They do not have a very big margin here. And Japan understands what it's like to be at the kind of receiving end of a oil shortage. This is what triggered the Second World War. And I'm not saying that Japan's going to go strike for oil now. What I'm saying is they understand the impact it has on their economy and doing everything they can to resume that flow. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon, become a monthly, yearly subscriber. You get the episodes on Patreon without those YouTube commercials, so you can take a look at them. I'm also uploading this video to Spotify, to Facebook, to Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it today. Links on Blue Sky and on LinkedIn, and all my contact information is down below. Got an announcement coming up the end of the week. What's going on with shipping is going on the road. So we're going to be hosting some videos on the road. It's going to be an exciting couple of weeks, actually, because Sal's getting out of here for a little bit of a break. I need a break. If you watch that last video I did on the Strait of Hormuz, week 17, I need a break. So we're going to be taking a little bit of a break. Don't worry, we're still going to be giving you our weekly updates. We're still going to be popping some videos in here, but they are going to be with some interesting backgrounds. Until our next episode, this is Sal.